Konami used to be a respected name in the game industry before they started disrespecting their IPs and turned to pachinko machines. So with that said, it's time we dive into one of their most criminally underrated series with Boktai, The Sun is in Your Hand. Boktai, The Sun is in Your Hand is an action-adventure RPG developed and published by Konami for the Game Boy Advance in July 17th, 2003 in Japan, 2 months later in North America, and a year later in Europe. This is a game that incorporated a strange gimmick with a solar sensor in the game cartridge itself, and I had the honor and privilege of playing this game as I went outside to enjoy the sunlight whilst I defeated vampires and other undead creatures. Now it's time to jump into the story and see what adventure we have in store for us before the sun rises.
In a place not too far from here and now, the end of the world approaches. The undead appear, breaking the natural cycle of life and death. The evolution of species ceases, and one by one, they become extinct.
The story of Boktai surrounds Django as he tries his best to save humanity by slaying the undead vampires with the power of the sun to avenge the death of his father in this post-apocalyptic age of darkness, with a little help from the messenger of the sun, Otenko. Boktai, The Sun is in Your Hand will run you around 9 hours to beat, with a little over an hour and a half more to get everything. It's a bittersweet experience because the game is just so unique and fun that it really makes you want to play it over again to enjoy the gameplay. Kojima really outdid himself with this game as he has a bit of his influence in this game, but we'll get to that part later. For now, we'll jump into the graphics and see how well they took advantage of the Game Boy Advance. The graphics for Boktai have a charming appeal to them that I truly enjoy. Maybe it's the dark theme the game is set in, but everything looks gritty and detailed, and the isometric camera was a great choice to give you a bit more to see rather than make it completely 2D. I love the design for Django, Otenko, the enemies, and even the bosses of the game and locations you traverse, though some dungeons do get a bit repetitive from time to time. It just all looks really well done, and I'm a sucker for pixel art, so this game is right up my alley, and I hope most of you out there will agree. The story and the artwork for this game are great, so let's open our ears and see what the soundtrack has to offer. The music for Boktai truly fits the themes this game holds of darkness and the undead, but also gives me a bit of an old Legend of Zelda Final Fantasy vibe with some of the tracks. Maybe some of you out there will know what I'm talking about, but it just adds to the enjoyment I get from this game. The music for exploration is calming at times. And the boss music amps it up a few notches to make your experience feel that much more important as you send these undead to the depths where they came from. The voice acting, while severely limited, is still enjoyable to me. There's not much there, but what you do have is decent enough and sometimes a bit funny when it comes to Otenko. Boktai, The Sun is in Your Hand sounds just as great as it looks, so let's see how this game plays and enjoy the package as a whole. The gameplay for Boktai is an isometric dungeon crawler with some really unique elements that, while some people saw as a gimmick, really help build immersion in this tiny handheld game. So let's address the elephant in the room and talk about the solar cartridge. Nintendo had this cool idea to put a solar sensor on the cartridge itself as a way to encourage players to go outside and enjoy the great outdoors while they played this game. How was this achieved, you ask? Well, as Django fights the undead to save humanity, he needs a special kind of weapon to help him do this, which is where the solar gun comes into play. This weapon is very iconic to Boktai and even Konami, to the point that Metal Gear Solid 4 has it as an actual hidden unlockable weapon. The solar gun is a weapon that uses the sun itself to draw power and use as ammunition, so you actually need it to play outside under the sunlight to absorb the sun's power to obtain ammo to use the gun. It's not as simple as it sounds either, as you can only get the solar power by also being outside in the game, or finding windows or ceiling holes within dungeons that shed sunlight onto certain areas so you can draw that power. You might be hearing me explain this and think that your only option to play this game is always going to be outside, but fortunately that isn't just the case, as there are generators in the game that store up any extra sunlight you gather while being outside, which you can absorb the power from those generators when you come into one. You can also use a solar nut item to replenish your solar gun's gauge so you can keep fighting on. So we covered the solar gun and how it works, while also talking about its connection to Metal Gear Solid. But did you know there's also a neat little thing that Kojima added from MGS into this game? It comes in the form of actual gameplay strategy when dealing with the enemies you face. There are a few undead creatures out there that are pretty tough to the point where you might want to use some stealth to avoid them. In these cases, you can actually press against the wall to move around silently and, just like Solid Snake, knock on said walls to gain attention from your enemies as you sneak past and press on. Honestly, I love collaborations and cameos and multiverse stuff like this, so it's really cool seeing Konami games interact with each other, even when games that aren't Konami interact with Konami games like Metal Gear Solid and Ape Escape. Sorry to gush so much about this game, so how about we go back to talking more about the gameplay itself and its ties to the sun. Before the game is started, you're asked to fill in some information like your current time zone and location. With this information, the game actually simulates the sun rising and setting and its position in the game. You can also use the sun to your advantage, as some enemies can't even touch you while you're under a sunspot collecting solar energy. As you defeat enemies and keep spelunking around dungeons, you'll eventually run into a coffin containing an immortal, which you have to return to the pile driver Otenko summons for you in order to finish them off. It's a mixed bag with me, because I actually love the idea of having to physically carry the boss to his doom, but at the same time it does slow down the pacing of the game, and it does get annoying sometimes when the immortal tries to escape and you have to shoot it with the sunlight to keep him in line, though that is a cool concept to begin with still. So now you've got your boss into the pile driver and it's time to end this. You'll actually have two generators expelling sunlight directly onto the immortal as the fight begins. The solar piles will help damage the immortal depending on how much sunlight the cartridge is exposed to, and you can also shoot the generators with your own solar gun to help them boost their power. Pay close attention too, as you'll see when the immortal's dark influence is about to reach the generators. Keep shooting the generators to keep the pressure on the immortal, while also shooting it to secure victory. Now you've secured your first victory against a vampire, but this is just the beginning. Hone your skills and the power of the sun itself, and keep moving towards your quest. I believe in you. Boktai, The Sun Is In Your Hand, is a legendary classic that truly deserves all the love it has earned and then some for creating a very unique game with a very unique feature. Sure, it may be a gimmick, but it helped promote good health and really made the game feel more immersive as you collected real sunlight to defeat these vampires. The game ended up with 2 more sequels and a spin-off game for the DS, but I think it's time the Solar Boy came back in a brand new game, even if it means sacrificing the solar sensor. Thanks for watching this special episode of UnderRadar. Drop a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more UnderRadar, and share this video around if you think we need more UnderRadar in the world. Also, I'd like to throw a quick shout out to artist Marcy Bones, who had a very passionate Twitter thread about this game which reminded me to even cover it. You should check out their Twitter and maybe consider donating to their Patreon to help fund development of their cool show, The Other Town. Thank you guys for another fantastic episode of UnderRadar, and I'll see you on the next one.